This is actually now our third Lunch and Learn between Celebrate One and Building Better Lives. And it's great to have folks here participating and partnering with us. This is the second time we've had to do this remotely over Zoom, but it seems to go pretty well. And I think all of us are starting to get to be kind of professionals at this. So appreciate everybody jumping on and participating today. Just kind of going to share a couple of things for what you can expect today. The goal of these Lunch and Learns is for us to have a supportive and an informative conversation. So hopefully you'll learn a few things, but also really just to kind of boost our interaction and our networking. We talk a lot in our trauma-informed care trainings around building community, around supporting one another. And my belief and my approach is just that we're just doing this in action right here. We're not going to talk about it, but we're going to do it. So we have people from all different agencies and different programs today, and hopefully you will connect, meet some folks, and learn some new things. If you can and you want to, you can share your video to kind of increase that level of interaction so we can see you and connect. But we understand if you are multitasking, or I know not everyone has a video camera, so that's fine too. If you can stay muted when you're not speaking, but feel free to jump in. We don't have too many folks, so you can just unmute yourself and chime in if you want to, or if you need to, you can send something in the chat box as well, and I can help unmute you during that time. So hopefully everybody's pretty familiar with how to use the chat box and how to communicate with one another, so you can answer questions, give some feedback, and participate in the discussion that way. So I'm going to actually try out a couple of, I'm going to try a new tool today to kind of boost some of our interaction with some of these Lunch and Learns. So I'm going to invite you on your computer, or you can use your cell phone on the side there, to go to menti.com. And this is going to be a way for us to just do a quick check-in with folks. And what this is initially here is just going to be just sort of we call this on our team kind of a weather check, just kind of seeing how is everybody feeling today. And so the question is, if your week, hopefully this showing up here, if your week was represented by the weather, kind of what would your week be like so far? So would you be kind of having a sunny week, cloudy week? Would it be sort of a thunderstorm, lots of challenges and struggles, or would you just be totally getting frozen out like a blizzard? So if you go to that menti.com and then you type in that code 645342, you should be able to kind of give an answer for where you're at, kind of doing that weather check-in. And while folks are doing that, seems like a lot of people are kind of in that cloudy zone. Looks like that's working all right. Everybody's feeling cloudy. All right. Now, are you guys able to see those results as well as they come up? Is that working? Okay. Well, we're going to use that one again in a little bit when we start talking about resilience. Okay, we got a couple of sunnies, one thunderstorm. Okay, so, I think that's probably about where folks are at in general right now, which actually kind of makes our conversation today pretty relevant, that there are definitely some challenges, definitely some things that we're all facing. And so how do we get through that cloudy weather some different ways? So, well, I am excited for our conversation today, excited that we've got a good group of folks here with us. And I'm really happy that we have one of my old colleagues, and would like to consider him a friend as well, Mr. Rashad Davis, partnering with me here today. I'll just kind of read this introduction, and then Rashad, you can feel free to share anything that you would like. Rashad is the program manager for Fatherhood Fundamentals at the Columbus Public Health. and they provide dads or active male participants of all ages with education on the importance of breastfeeding, smoke cessation, and emotional and behavioral health and wellness. So providing individual group-based parental education and support, and help with navigating community resources and balancing that work and home life. So you can imagine why Rashad and I would both be pretty excited and passionate about work with fathers when we're in the home visiting world. So I was really excited when I learned about your program, and was even more excited when you were willing to come on today to talk a little bit about resilience. So Rashad, do you want to follow up on any of that? Just share kind of what you do, how long you've been doing it.
Yeah, so, we came on in February of 2019. And so Fatherhood Fundamentals is really an extension of My Baby and Me, which is a home visiting program at Columbus Public Health. They are sponsored by National Healthy Start. And so we have 101 sites across the country. National Healthy Start has actually been serving fathers since around 1992, 93. And so there's been an evolution in what those services look like for fathers and families up to this point. And I think up until last year, they were kind of just doing it as a sidebar to offering moms and babies those services through National Healthy Start. And so, with the new grant cycle and everything, they felt it, was paramount to, kind of write it in as something that was very much necessary and needed for families, as opposed to kind of a sidebar conversation. And so that's kind of where, I came in. Prior to that, of course, I was doing that, individual and family therapy. And so when I had the chance to actually work closely with fathers, individually and in a group-based setting, of course, I was very excited to, kind of enter into that arena, because I know that work is so very important. Especially given how disconnected and detached fathers feel from the services that are provided to families, specifically moms and babies. And so, so we're a year in. Our goal is to serve 100 fathers per year. And so that year goes from, April to April. And so, we're constantly growing. We've had to build the program from the ground up. When I came on, there was nothing in place. And so everything from our information cards to our referral forms to, how we project these services to the community, we've had to kind of revamp that, several times. My project director, Lindsay Chiavarelli, and I have just been working diligently on that to make sure that we can provide the best quality services to these dads that we work with.
That's awesome. So I know you said in that description there, you've got kind of individual and group stuff. Of course, for all of us, work is looking really different over the last couple of months and moving forward. Sure. Are the dads that you're working with connected with a variety of different programs, or in normal times, whatever that is, what might that kind of engagement with some of the men in the community look like?
So I think what's so interesting about my program is that although I can offer them services, I can offer them that one-on-one support, a lot of my job is really based in making that connection for them, right? And so if they don't already have a village around them of people who can really attend to their needs, and we're talking about specific needs, because we know all families are different. So, all fathers they come to the table with different needs. So my job is to really create that village around them, make them confident in the fact that not only can they come to me, but they can also reach out to the people that we put in their network, right? And so that may mean other fatherhood programs that offer services that are like an expansion of what I offer them. And of course, they can be linked with my program and also linked with another fatherhood program. And so, so we really just want to make sure that they have really a team of people providing that support, providing that education, and making sure that we kind of hit them at every angle, right? So I'm kind of like that one-stop shop when it comes to serving them.
Okay. Yeah, well, and it's interesting. I know we think about this a lot in terms of community-based services, whatever that looks like, we make those connections with families, and sometimes they are, there's that deficit, there's that lack of connection, and quickly then they find some support from us, but trying to help transition that to say, look, I'm not going to be here forever. I'm not your long-term support for this. So who are the natural supports? Who are, extended family members, neighborhood folks, who are some consistent people in your circle that you can connect with? So sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing, trying to build that broader kind of natural support and networks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and again, and I brought this over into this work from, when I was offering that direct care to families, is that when I first interact with a father, immediately I'm thinking about how can we get you to a place to where you are able to manage on your own, right? And you don't necessarily need my services. However, you do have that community, that village around you,
Right.
that should you need services after
Because none of us can do it on our own completely.
Exactly.
It's on your own, but with somebody who you don't necessarily have a treatment plan with. You just have a natural, connection and relationship with. So
exactly, yeah, and getting them to the point to where they know what to be asking for, to know how to advocate for themselves, to know how to really go into a room and say, hey, I need this help. Specifically, I need help in this particular area, right? Because a lot of times when you ask, like, if you just go general with these questions and you're talking to dads, it's like, well, what can I do for you? A lot of times they don't know.
Sure.
They genuinely don't know what they need in the moment. And so it takes some work to get them there. But again, immediately I'm looking at how can we get them to that point.
So there's a question from Nadine. Thanks for typing that in, Nadine. Is this different than Fathers to Be, or do you work in conjunction with that program?
No, this is different than Fathers to Be. We don't necessarily work in conjunction with any other fatherhood programs, but again, we do refer out to fatherhood programs. I've referred people to Action for Children. I've referred individuals to, I know one of your colleagues, the 100 Urban Fathers, and so I've referred fathers, of course, to the Urban League, and so we are a standalone. But our mission, and me and my project director have really been vigilant about creating, and we're looking at people who really want to come to the table and build this with us. But we're looking at something that looks like an advisory council when it comes to fathers, right? So we can share best practice, so we can share resources with one another, and kind of be at the table and and even bringing fathers in to speak to a lot of the services that they have already, been able to access, and services that they also feel like they need. And so even though we are a standalone, we're very much trying to create a village in the work that we're doing and the services that we're providing for fathers.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you're just kind of just starting to still be in that sort of dreaming and imagining and kind of seeing what it could be, still building it up. And even though there's a lot of work to do, you're still kind of building it and expanding it from what it can be moving forward. So well, hey, if you can put in your contact info in the chat box there for folks so they can follow up with you as far as your program or any questions they would have. I'm going to kind of shift gears for us to sort of our topic for the day. And, we're certainly not only going to talk about, engaging with fathers and men in this program or this conversation, but it's just an example when we start talking about resilience. So thinking about resilience is something that comes up a lot in conversations around trauma-informed care. And that was the topic that was sort of on the agenda for this month. But I think especially this, resilience is such a buzzword. It's such kind of something that gets thrown around in a lot of ways. And so, obviously we're talking about these protective factors. We're talking about there's adversity, there's challenges, but then what are the experiences? Who are the people? What are the resources that kind of buffer what that adversity is facing, what that individual is facing? But I think that a lot of our definitions in our conversation on resilience are kind of limited. They don't really encapsulate and really capture what a lot is going on, especially in this infant and maternal and family health kind of world. So we're going to kind of try to give this Menti program another try here again. So if you already logged on to that, it should show up for you. I'm curious for folks to kind of offer, what does resilience mean to you when you're thinking about resilience? And if you're on that site, then it should share that question for you. And you should be able to kind of put in 3 words or a few phrases in there, and then it should kind of populate as a word cloud. We'll just kind of get some input from folks about, when we're talking about resilience, what does that kind of mean to you in that sense? If you can't get on that Menti website, you can also just put what your answer would be in the group chat there. I'd be curious to hear from folks. So, I think, and I'm going to kick this over to you, Rashad, here to get your sense of what resilience means. But we talk, we get these words that get thrown around, and then they get just kind of chewed up. And after a while, the words don't even mean anything anymore, So trauma-informed care is one of those phrases. Resilience is one of those phrases. It just kind of gets, overused, and it gets kind of term fatigue. But especially, when I heard you talking about like some of these dads, I think it's true for the moms and for other folks in the family. They don't even know, what can I ask for? What should I be looking for? Or even how to put some of the language around it. And I think sometimes that's on us, because when we come to provide those services, I call it things like natural supports. Well, they just call it family. I call it things like, well, who's your primary care physician? And they have another phrase for it. So sometimes it's a terminology and a language issue too. So when you're thinking about resilience, what does that mean to you, Rashad?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an excellent question. I think it's such an important dialogue, and I believe we're going to find ourselves really having this conversation more and more as we reimagine what community-based services are going to look like for families. But yeah, so when I'm looking at this, ultimately, I'm always assessing my ability, or how well I'm able to mentally and emotionally navigate changes, barriers, crises, to get back to what I refer to as baseline relatively quickly, right? Or potentially even be in a better state than before. So really, in other words, it's like, for me, personifying my own efficacy, right? Personifying that self-efficacy. And so conceptualizing what I need to do, and then planning or mapping out a course of action. And this is why it's really so hard for a lot of families, right? They just haven't really been in a space where they've been able to really conceptualize, hey, this is what I really want to accomplish. And here are the steps, like practical, realistic steps that I can take to kind of get where I want to go. And so also, when I'm looking at that mental and that emotional toughness, I think it's really so important to keep in mind that really the two go hand in hand. And there are some really significant distinctions between thinking and feeling in terms of processes, right? And so, of course, we know how trauma can significantly stunt a person's ability to tap into these processes because of how it kind of rewires the brain, so to speak, right? And can be so difficult for people to even talk about it if they have past trauma that's gone untreated. So definitely that mental and that emotional toughness is kind of like where my mind goes when I'm thinking about resilience, not only with myself, but with the families that I'm serving.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for that, man. I'm going to kind of grab a picture of all these words that people are throwing up here. So, and you definitely jumped right into, my wheelhouse of things, I love to talk about in terms of, the impact of past traumas and how that, shapes our brain. And, one thing that you said that stood out to me is the ability to kind of assess the situation and make a plan to kind of move forward. What do I need? What are the resources I need? Who am I going to bring around me to face this adversity? And how am I going to make a plan moving forward? I think back to, for me, one of the biggest adversities I went through was when my daughter was born, 10 weeks premature, really surprisingly. We went from everything was fine, 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, all of a sudden we were rushed to the hospital, ambulance, and she was born, 12 hours later. But immediately I'm thinking, okay, who am I going to call in my family? And who do I need to alert in my education program? And can I take time off from work? Well, all of those things, though, depend upon, like what we were talking about, that ability to have some self-regulation, to have some resources. And all of that is based on how would I respond to things in the past. And so we talk about those adaptive skills that people have learned to help them survive in whatever situation it is. That adaptive skill carries us forward to whatever I'm facing right now. And I'm going to apply those same skills and those same techniques that I've learned. So, determination, thriving, toughness, that's going to look really different for different people. And that's then where the challenge is on us to be open to, okay, what does toughness look like for this family that I'm engaging with right now? That toughness might show up a little bit differently than how I would show what toughness would look like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. And it's interesting that toughness really, it grows out of those experiences that we have and can successfully navigate, right? So if you're dealing with a family that has been dealing with adversity really all of their life, right, and can't really recollect being able to kind of like successfully, jump those hurdles, right, or kind of navigate around things and come out on the other side and be better for it, it's really hard for them to kind of tap into those things. So I just think it's kind of really important to look at each family very, very closely and to be able to assess where those successes are that they might not have really been able to see for themselves.
Yeah, right on. I just want to make sure folks know, you're welcome to chime in conversation in the chat box there. Thanks, Dana, for jumping in. And anyone is welcome to kind of unmute and just kind of say, hey, I got a thought here. If you want to use the participants button there, you can kind of raise your hand or try to chime in if you want to, but this doesn't just have to be a two-way conversation. So, Rashad, you kind of said like we have to assess, when we're meeting with a family, what some of those resilience things might be. How are you keeping an eye out for some of that stuff? Because I know I can have blinders and I can be looking for the things that to me would look like resilience, the things that I would kind of have in my typical definition. What does toughness look like to me? How do you keep your eyes open for assessing what those things are with families?
So, really, really good question. And I think, I've had colleagues in the past who have really struggled with this, but one of the first things I'm really saying to myself when I first interact with a family or a dad is like, this is not the Rashad show, okay? So this is not me coming in and kind of molding this situation into what I feel like this should be, right? I have to always keep that in the back of my mind. I lean very heavily on motivational interviewing. It works for me when assessing stages of change with clients, regardless really of the service that I'm providing. I think that's important. Because ultimately what you don't want to do is jump right into action mode with a person who is not quite there yet, right? Mm-hmm. They're still like kind of in that pre-contemplative mm-hmm. area where they feel like there's not much that really needs to be done. So like kind of, why are you here in my home, or why am I sitting here talking to you? And so it's kind of really critical to know where they are in terms of self-awareness, their willingness to engage, and then also how ready they are to really commit to a process. Because we know that these things can take time, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we have a very short period of time to work with. And again, this is case-by-case basis. And so, it's really being able to say, it's not going to be it may not always be what you feel is ideal in the end when you're kind of disconnecting from the family, but you can take them as far as you can with the time that you have, right? So I'm a fervent advocate for establishing some level of appropriate rapport, you know, prior to jumping into any kind of process. And so what ultimately what motivational interviewing does for me and what it allows me to do is it kind of allows me to solicit information from a client or a family regarding specific life events or circumstances and reframe those events, right? To reveal how they successfully overcame some adversity during that time, any challenges that were, you know, apparent barriers that they had in place. So I'm looking very intently through a strength-based lens at steps a client has taken in the past, right? Steps or courses of action that they may not have recognized at the time. And so a lot of times what I'm doing is just listening very intently and kind of pointing out, hey, okay, so yeah, you know, you might not have the money in your pocket that you want now to kind of budget the way you need to, but you were able to do this before. So what were some of the things that you had in place at the time that allowed you to budget for these 4 or 5 children in separate households that you know you need to kind of like pay your child support for? Now you have another infant on the way in your current home. What were some of the things you've done in the past? And we can tap into that and use it as a foundation going forward.
I love that you brought up motivational interviewing. You know, there's a couple things about that, and I would encourage folks if they, even if you are kind of familiar with it, you know, do some Google searches around motivational interviewing. There's tons of great resources out there. I think the two things that stand out to me on that is the whole approach just kind of has this curiosity, you know, you're just coming from this basic approach of, well, tell me more about that. What does that look like for you? Well, tell me more about why that's important to you. And you always start from a curiosity of the client, the family, the person who you're talking with is really the expert. They really know it a lot better than I do. And my whole job is just to ask questions to just make it a little bit more interesting and bring some of that stuff out. And then when it really works, you land on what really matters to people. You land on what that motivation is. And what is really powerful and exciting about home visiting programs and infant and maternal health programs is that you're connecting with people at the core of life. You know, that everyone has this deep passion for caring for their children and caring for their family. And for so many, for so many people, there's nothing more important than family. But you have to go through that process of asking those questions, inviting it, hearing it in their language, and hearing it kind of in the way that they think about it. But then when you get to that core belief, that's a resilience factor. You know, why am I doing what I'm doing? It's because this is what I believe. It's because these are my kids who I'm committed to. It's because, you know, this is what's really important to me. Okay, well, let's always keep that in the forefront of our minds here. You know, let's always land on that and remind what that is. So that curiosity that then you get to what really matters, and then that's a resilience factor. This is the thing, above all else, this is what's really important to me.
I think it's so interesting. Like if you know, for people who may not have really studied motivational interviewing like in depth and have incorporated it, the interesting thing about it is it really allows you to not work as hard as you would, okay, in a you know, using a different approach, right? And so ultimately these open-ended questions are going to allow the client to really stumble upon answers, solutions for themselves. And what you're really doing is kind of guiding them down that road, right? You're pointing out paths to them as you're asking these open-ended questions to get them to say, hey, there are other avenues here that you haven't taken. They're all going to the same destination, right? But there are other avenues that you can take. And when you take a step back, if you get skilled at it, really it takes a lot of pressure off of whether you're a clinician or a social worker or what have you, to kind of grinding those gears like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, this is not quite working.
Mhm.
Where with that motivational interviewing strategy, you're really allowing the client to be in control, because they really are. They're the ones who have the power. They're the ones who really ultimately have the answers. We don't have the answers. It's not
Yeah.
our job to fix it.
I don't
Right?
have to have all the answers. I just got to be willing to ask some questions and genuinely listen. And one of the and then believe the person who I'm asking that what they say is really true for them. And really
Absolutely.
believe when they're saying, "Well, here's how I did it before, and this is what worked for me." Okay, so I'm really going to believe you, and let's do something with that. So,
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's
I would
a
caution, I would just say, just as to piggyback off that, I would caution, I think something that you said is really important. And I think sometimes providers can struggle with this, but when you said to really believe what the client is saying, what this family is saying, that is so very important, because a client can tell you something and you may not agree, but that doesn't really matter, because this is the client in their quality world, and this is what they believe is going to kind of get them to that next step. This is what they feel like you need to know, right? And those things are important. The things that are kind of going on in a provider's mind is like, well, maybe not so much that, maybe it's more this. I think we really need to take those things at face value and say, okay, that's the foundation that we really need to build from.
Mhm.
Because we can move away from the work that we're really doing with that client if we don't take them seriously.
Yeah, and just what you said, it's not my show. This isn't about me, and it's a really tricky line to 100% believe who you're working with. Doesn't mean I agree, but I'm going to believe that what you're saying is true for you, and so we're going to work with that. But so yeah, we threw out a lot of stuff there. I'd love to hear from other folks who are listening in. Just a couple of keywords that we threw out there. If any folks use motivational interviewing at all, or those types of kind of approaches, I'd be really curious to hear from folks how you keep that kind of approach of believing the client, believing the mom, believing the family member when they're kind of saying things that you're like, oh my gosh, I don't really know how I feel about that, but if this is what you're telling me. So I'd love to hear folks' comments about that. You can unmute and chime in here if you'd like to. There was a question in the chat box: what mental health agencies do you connect with? Is that one that you have an answer to at all, Rashad?
Yeah. So, and I'm a little different in that respect, just because in terms of, well, number one, let me just say this. So when you're talking about mental health with men in general, really, right? There's a stigma on that term, okay? When you're talking about mental health, so a lot of times I'm leaning more toward that emotional health and wellness, and how they're feeling in the moment, how they've been feeling in the past couple of weeks or months or so, and kind of working from there. But to answer the question, I tend not to refer dads or build relationships with agencies. I tend to identify specific people within the agency that I know I can connect with and network with, so that I have a direct referral source when I need to send a dad somewhere. The last thing I want to do is, when I'm working with a father, to say, hey, here's a number for you to call, okay? They're going to schedule an appointment for you, and they're going to have you come in. They're going to have you do an assessment. That assessment may take an hour, maybe two, depending on psychosocial history, what have you. And then they'll call you to set up times for sessions. And again, this is me and my approach. I know in my experience, you lose people sometimes with that. And so when I have direct referral sources, like, hey, I can call my colleague right then and there and say, hey, I have a dad, right? Or I can email him, or I can text him, hey, I have this dad. Here are some things that he's throwing out here to me. I don't want to get into a whole lot of detail because I don't want to take away the things that they need to do in their arena for their, for the purposes of them building rapport with the client. But I also I always like to have that personal interaction with a service provider so that, the father feels like it's, like I'm, number one, taking him seriously. And number two, that I actually care about him connecting with someone that I have said, hey, this person can actually help you.
Yeah,
right?
that is a challenge with the systems, though, for sure. I mean, it's like you
Yes,
still got to jump through the hoops, and I might know that I know a good provider who's in this program, but you're going to have to go through central intake one way or another.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of
Yeah.
us have been
But the
in
thing
those
is, at least having
situations.
them to be able to talk to someone, right? And so even though, and we're not saying, hey, you're going to be able to work directly with this person. But if I have someone at that agency, then, there's more of a personalized feel from my client.
Mhm.
But to answer the question, I have a gentleman that I work with. He's a PhD. He runs his own. He has his own practice. He's over here off of East Livingston. I work with him. I've worked with Southeast in the past. When dads are in social service and things like that, of course, the Buckeye Ranch is great for some parents. But it really just depends. It really just depends on the client's needs and, what, first of all, length, when it comes to, what are they looking for in terms of the length of treatment? Is this going to be a short-term thing, long-term thing? If it is going to be long-term, how long are we talking? I definitely do my own assessment of them prior to referring them out, just to see if there are things that, of course, past trauma history. And I don't get into a whole lot of detail, but if there
Mhm.
is that trauma history there, then I'm always careful
Mhm.
to take that into consideration when I am referring them to agencies.
Yeah. Well, I think again that just kind of highlights the benefit of these kind of lunch and learn conversations here. Even folks aren't meeting you in person necessarily, but hopefully after this, if they're working with fathers, they can say, well, I participated on this call with Rashad. He's a solid guy. You'll get linked to this program. So, hey, Lynn, did you want to make a
Yeah.
comment? I saw you
Hi.
unmuted. Thanks.
Yes.
Jump on in.
I am so sorry that I got in late, but Lynn LaCour, Far East Neighborhood Pride Center, Department of Neighborhoods, I really keyed in on the whole motivational design. And I would love to get a link to that process if someone could provide that and send it to the group, because I think it's important in whatever you do to be able to talk in that positive realm.
Yeah. Well, I will put a couple of links up in the chat box before we're done. I mean, there is an entire, motivational interviewing network, and it's an approach that's been around for a long time that started working with individuals who were in addiction recovery, and so it's certainly kind of tailored towards that type of population. But like Rashad was talking about, a lot of us have seen benefits of it in a wide range of uses. So. We'll try to put some links in there about what some of those approaches can be. So let me shift the conversation just a little bit. And Lynn, thanks for jumping in and asking that question. Other folks are able to do that too if you'd like. So I did want to just kind of we talk about building resilience with the families we're working with, but anytime we're talking about trauma-informed care concepts, whether it's past experiences or whether it's resilience building, I really believe there's this kind of multifaceted approach to it, that it's not only the adult we're working with, the caregiver. We're thinking about the resilience of the child, but we're thinking about our resilience as well. These experiences are impacting us. And of course, we have, maybe some more resources, some more privileges, and it might be easier to an extent, but yet we've got to get up every day and go out there again, and carrying a big caseload, and taking on the challenges that we're trying to help out every day can start to wear us down. So, just thinking about this question about how do you build resilience in yourself? How do you build resilience in your team? I'm not sure how big of a team you work with necessarily, Rashad, but how do you do that and not kind of feel overwhelmed? So, and this would be a question, I'd love to hear your input on, and folks would be welcome to give their answers in the chat box there as well. What are some things that you all do to build resilience in yourself and your team? But how would you answer that, Rashad?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's extremely important. And what I'll do is I'll start with the team first. So on my team, we have outreach workers, we have nurses, and we have social workers. All wonderful, wonderful, dedicated people. I cannot say enough about my team. They are amazing, amazing at what they do, and they care very deeply about the work. And so for me, it's really important to not underestimate the power of morale and how I can contribute to a healthy work environment where and when I can. I believe that's very important because we are, thrown so many things at one time, in any given moment, and especially now, right? With such a huge lifestyle adjustment for everyone, I think that's really important. And so I'm constantly telling myself it's okay for me to be aware of how the people I work with are thinking, how they're feeling, how they're adjusting. It's okay for us to talk about feeling isolated in the work, or unsure of ourselves with certain tasks, or especially when we're feeling like our voice is not necessarily heard or valued. So it's okay to have these conversations. It's okay to lean on, my coworkers, or my coworkers to lean on me, and for us to have that dialogue, because in that dialogue alone, there's some of that release, right? There's some of that pressure can be kind of, filtered through, and then we can kind of compartmentalize some of the things that we're dealing with. In terms of myself, I can't say enough about prioritizing tasks and even services I provide to families, right? It can be challenging, but it's critical to the quality of services that I like to offer. And so, there are, we know a lot of families will come to us in crises. A lot of families feel like they need things right then and there. And that can be really tough, especially for our people. And I know everyone on the call, they're very serious about the work that they do. And I know they, I know that they love what they do, or they wouldn't be doing it. It's not like we can get rich doing this work, right? And so being able to really prioritize, I know this family needs this, I know this family needs this, but being able to step back and say, okay, I know I need to tackle something first, second, third, and having to, being able to have that, again, that emotional toughness to do that for yourself. For the families I work with, it's definitely not the first interaction with social services and, of any kind, really. So families can get a sense right away if a provider is preoccupied, feeling rushed, if they're just tired, thinking about the things that they need to attend to. And families can really sense when you are not present with them in the moment. So, for me, definitely prioritizing those tasks and prioritizing services I'm providing to my dads is huge for me, just to keep things in perspective.
Yeah, I certainly know folks are, um, ability to kind of smell out the BS is real. People can sense that real quickly. And I always just have to be honest with people, if I'm tired, if I'm spent, I had some families who could only meet on Friday afternoons, and I would just tell them, I said, look, we'll do it because that's your time. I'm gonna tell you, I'm not my best self on a Friday afternoon, so I'm real tired. But I think they appreciate that honesty of kind of just knowing
Absolutely.
here's where I'm coming from, and I'm not gonna fake it. So Yeah, and I appreciated what you said about kind of prioritizing. There are always more things to do, always more requests and demands and needs that come flying in. So I'm curious from other folks if anyone out there kind of has any input on things that you do, or ways to kind of focus on building that resilience for yourself. And again, that word resilience is still just kind of, it just doesn't quite feel adequate. It feels like there's got to be, we're talking about more than that. I don't know, maybe I'll put this kind of word cloud back up again that people contributed to. How are we building that, determination, overcoming hardships? We get knocked down, but we're getting back up. And again, it's like, all right, we might think about that with our clients and families. And if they go through some really difficult hardships, one thing that has been clear to me in connecting with the Celebrate One community is that you all deal with one of the greatest hardships that any service provider could deal with, more often, I think, than most, which is the death of clients. You're dealing with lost babies more often than most, because that's directly in the work that you're doing, and that is hard to go through that, and to lose a baby with a family, and then still return and still do that work and maintain that hope. So somebody put elasticity in there. That's a cool concept, thinking about being flexible, thinking about being able to adjust a little bit. Faith, grit, compassion. There's a lot of components to it, and again, these are kind of words that we throw out in a lot of different ways, but yeah, figuring out what that looks like is challenging.
Yeah, I'm loving the words I'm seeing here, and a lot of these go hand in hand when you're talking about resilience. There's a lot of these, concepts that are very, very important to be able to kind of tap into and to have in a reserve for yourself as you're navigating the work. So really, really great words here, concepts here I'm seeing.
Yeah. Any other folks want to jump in and just kind of share what that looks like in your work, or maybe even, kind of what that's looking like right now in this situation? How are we building resilience for ourselves in this situation that we're all kind of going through?
Jesse and Rashad, this is Karen Dawson with CareSource.
Hey.
I was thinking about several things that I do, or I'm a community marketing rep for CareSource, and I'm always out in the community talking, working, educating clients and prospects, also making staff presentations. For me right now, even though I work from home, I don't work from home this much, so I find that it's important for me to actually schedule or make sure that I understand my schedule coming up, but also allow those times to sit back, breathe, think about things that I want to do, and be there and making a decision that is not just for me, but for the clients that I actually serve. So looking at that, Rashad, I would like to speak with you a little bit more about resources. There was 3 things that I took from the conversations. One, resources, also building the program, and then again, the motivational interviews. There's a lot that happens with all of us out in the community. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for what they do. It's not easy. Working in the area of disparity and also those challenges that people have, we have to be mindful of where we are in that whole picture. And I always take the time to think about things, pray a little bit, and ask for the best outcome for anyone. Also, mentioning or being who you are is not a bad thing. Telling people if you don't have the answer to the question, but you will find it, I would rather someone do that to me versus telling me something that I don't know. So saying in the light of that, with everything that we all do, it's important and it's valuable that we kind of bounce off of each other for ideas, look at what someone else is doing. It may not work for you, but you just never know. So sharing those ideas are very, very important. But thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for your comments. You know, we definitely appreciate you. My information is in the chat box, and so definitely feel free to use that. You know, that number is my direct line at the office. You can also utilize the email there for anything that you feel like you might need from me in terms of resources or links specific to motivational interviewing. I know Jesse was saying that he was going to share some as well. And so, yeah, thank you so much for your comments. I did like the one thing that you said when, you know, you were talking about just being able to admit, right, that you don't have the answer that they are looking for right now, but you will do your due diligence to come up with something that they can use. I think that's so very important. And I think that a lot of times where some providers may go wrong is giving inaccurate information. And that could be something as small as a number that's just not working anymore for an agency or a provider that you're trying to link them with. And so ensuring that you're actually giving families, for me, ensuring I'm giving fathers specifically, accurate information that they can use is very, very critical. So I really like what you said there.
That is very important, and I make that speech every time I do a presentation. If I don't know something, I'm not going to stand here and tell you something that I don't know. I will take your question, and I will get an answer for you. That right there relieves a lot of pressure, because if you don't know, why would you tell somebody something that you do not know? I would prefer if someone was talking to me and they didn't have an answer, to go get the answer and come back and tell me. That's the way it's supposed to work. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Right on. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions about things? I reposted Rashad's contact info there, which is I'm going to guess probably the best way to get any kind of fathers or male figures connected with your program. Anybody else want to jump in either with a question or a comment, kind of just about any of the concepts we were talking about during this time here? Other than sending you an email or connecting on your or your office line there, Rashad, is there an income restriction at all for linking with your program, or anything else they should know about getting dads connected?
So two things I'll say that are really unique about our program. Number one, we don't have any income restrictions or limits. Well, I'll say three. Secondly, we don't have any age ranges, right? So, we can work with teen dads, we can work with, the older dads. Thirdly, so when you say, when you look in that description of our program and it says active male participants, that means that the males that I work with don't necessarily have to be biological dad, right? So they could be boyfriend, they could be uncle, they could be, cousin, whoever that active male participant is in the life of mom, right, and baby. That's who we can definitely enroll in the program. There is one caveat. So Celebrate One, I know they are, very deeply rooted in that home visiting piece in terms of, expecting moms. And so what My Baby and Me does is, we get the referrals, and our outreach workers, our social workers, or our nurses will, enroll them in the program. And then what they do is they'll speak to mom about this program or speak to dad about the program, and they refer dad to me. So the only caveat is that we need to have dad linked with mom, who's a Healthy Start participant, right, through the home visiting program, and then he can get my services. Aside from that, though, we do outreach, right? And so the outreach that I do really is to generate more referral sources, and those are those external referral sources. And so I was very excited prior to the lifestyle changes, that the pandemic has thrown at us. I was very excited to be approved as one of the state mandated programs that are provided at the Franklin County Correctional centers, right? And so we were going to be doing a round of group-based education in both of those centers, you know, and that was going to be on a weekly basis. Of course, with everything going on, that, you know, that has been, you know, put on hold for right now. But we're going to be really excited when we are kind of able to get back to business, that we'll have that for those dads who are in those correctional centers and transitioning back to the community, so we can have them set up with a strong foundation as they return back to the family unit. So
that is a
huge.
powerful program. I mean, that's, you know, that's that reciprocal connection that we talk about so much with relationships and attachment. That's going to be meaningful for those dads coming out and meaningful for the families that are reuniting and connecting. That's really exciting.
Absolutely.
Love to hear some more about that. So I put the link for the feedback for this session in the chat box. If you folks can please, you know, take a chance to please give me some feedback and an idea of what we can be talking about moving forward. Any other kind of final thoughts from folks? I'm going to share a few other things here. Sheila mentioned a comment that, you know, it's more important now than ever that those of us who are providing services and engaging with the community be trusted persons in our jobs and show that we're really advocating. So that was a really helpful comment.
Rashad, this is Lynn again. What
Yes, ma'am.
codes predominate in the number of people that you see, or what part of town do you find the most work that you in terms of your clients?
You know, that's a really interesting question. And I can honestly say I get dads from everywhere. You know, so we are, and I probably should have thrown this out there earlier, we are restricted to Columbus and Franklin County, but I get dads really from all over. There really is no zip code or area of the city that is, that I'm more, that my clients are kind of more saturated in. But, we get them from all over. We also get, people in the Somali community. I get dads in the Somali community. I have dads in, the Nepali community. So, I mean, it's, we work with them all. We work with them all. There's no set demographic or specific demographic that we get more of. They're just coming from various different, sectors of the city.
It's a big city. There's a lot of a lot of guys, a lot of dads out there. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really neat. Well, Rashad, I can't thank you enough. Appreciate your wisdom, your insight, your contribution. We'll certainly have to connect with you some more. I'm going to share out just a couple of things with folks here as we kind of wrap up. I posted a poll here through the Zoom meet. Some folks on our team were just kind of talking and recognizing potentially a need to focus on FASD and NAS challenges and issues is another one. That's a big word there. There's a lot of things that can be involved with that, but we would maybe be talking about how to help identify some of the delays if you're in a Help Me Grow program, how to overcome some of the stigma issues if you're working with a parent or a family where the child has fetal alcohol or neonatal abstinence issues. There's certainly a lot of stigma and shame, but overcoming those things to move forward. So just wanted to get a sense if folks would be interested in participating in that in a lunch and learn setting. So I'll leave that up for a couple more seconds here if you wouldn't mind voting on that. Also just want to share with folks kind of upcoming things with our agency. We're trying to do these lunch and learns on a monthly basis. So the next one will be in the month of May on the 21st. And Thursday, May 21st, if you got an email invite for this, you'll probably get another one. But if you want to go ahead and sign up, that link is there. We also are continuing to offer for our Celebrate One partners our full trauma-informed care training. Several folks participated back on April 16th, and that went really well. The date that we have assigned for that is Thursday, July 21st. I put stay tuned for details because I think, let's be honest, we don't know what July is going to look like for all of us. So that might be virtual. We might have figured out how to social distance and be in the same room together. So stay tuned, but that's the date that we have assigned. And you can send me an email or just mark your calendar and keep an ear out for our full trauma-informed care training. And when we do that, we talk about ACEs, we talk about brain development, we talk about understanding regulation, and some practical tips and approaches for how to build regulation with clients and families. And then I just want to make sure folks know our Franklin County Family and Children First Council is doing community conversations every Tuesday around the COVID-19 crisis and some of the challenges we're experiencing. And so the next one of those is Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, May 5th. And there's a sign up there for you as well. You can also find those things. We've got a Facebook page or send me an email. So lots of different ways to connect with that. Okay, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to put that in the chat box. Again, appreciate so much folks being here. Can let people see the results for your interest in that conversation. Thank you again to Rashad. We'll give a virtual, clapping our hands to you for that, just for your being here today and also for your hard work in the community in an important area. So as always, these are meant to be community-based. These are meant to be collaborative. So if you have ideas or suggestions, shoot them out to me. And I'm doing my best to find ways that we can connect and support the home visiting programs and the Celebrate One group of partners. I'm always so impressed with the work you all are doing in any given situation. And now more than ever, this work is important. So thank you to all of you. And thanks for being here today. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you for having me.